Welcome back to They Say It Takes a Village. As some of you probably know by now, Wear That Now and this podcast have joined forces. They have kindly provided me with these gorgeous outfits that you see on each episode. And for some of you who don't know the concept behind Wear That Now, let me explain what they do. Once you head over to their Instagram account and fill out their style survey, they team you up with your own personal stylist who will then curate a personalized box to fit your budget, your style, and occasion. That box gets sent straight to your doorstep for you to try the clothes in the comfort of your own home. The outfits that you love, you keep, and the ones that you don't, you simply return. It's as easy as that. So if you're anything like me and you've got occasions coming up through the year and the idea of going to a crowded mall, especially with little children in tow, gives you anxiety, do yourself a favor and head over to @wear.that.now, click the link in their bio, fill out your style survey, and start shopping from the comfort of your own home. Before we get into today's podcast, I wanted to take a moment to give you guys a little insight as to how we actually create content and pick subject matters for discussion. Each week, my team and I, we sit down and brainstorm. We brainstorm topics and subjects that we find are having a societal impact as a whole, whether that's in the parenting space, health, wellness, and everything in between. The topic of choice today was male mental health and well-being. And of course, we went off and did our research, and we were met with some staggering statistics that were, to be honest, quite alarming. Now more than ever, our men and boys are struggling. And which is why I'm so eager to have this conversation today with a repeat expert who's been on this podcast before and backed by popular demand. Ciarán McBreen is an executive performance coach, author, and advocate. And he's here with me today to shed some light on what is going on with our boys, teenagers, and men, and how we could potentially help them navigate through this ever-changing landscape. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone and please help me welcome again, Ciarán McBreen. Thank you so much for being here.
Right, thanks for having me. I hope you can hear me. 2 days ago, I had no voice, so hopefully we can get through.
No, I'm sure you'll be fine. You sound well. And of course, it's just we can crank up the microphone when needed.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
It was true, honestly, when we were having a look at what is going on with boys and men, it is alarming. And it's something that, I find it's hit quite close to home. I've got 2 boys, and we're in the process of, they're very young, and it's shaping them and raising them, hopefully to be empathetic, kind, well-adjusted men. And I feel now more than ever, that has become a bit of a struggle. So, to get right into it, you've had a sort of almost like a lifetime of experience, whether that's coaching or advocating for mental health. You obviously wrote a book about listening when it comes to teenagers called Listen. So just take us back. In your earliest context, what made you sort of get into this line of work?
Yeah, I suppose I correct you firstly, right? You've probably got 3 boys at home with your husband.
Oh, that's true. Got that guy.
And that's somewhere where we need to go, because understanding your husband is very important, very important. Of course, that works twofold. It started off, I would say, getting into this space as young as 8 years old.
Yeah, that's quite young.
Yeah, I was captain of my under-8 football team. And we got to the final, and I couldn't understand why the coach wasn't having training before the final. And I was like, this isn't good enough. We gotta be better. We gotta be better. So I arranged a training session for my under-8 boys, and I had all the boys down with a bag of footballs and arranged the football field, and we were doing laps and we were doing shooting and we were doing everything, and we won. And I think back, and I'm very proud of myself. That I took that on, that natural kind of leadership on, and that natural element of wanting more from me and from others, from my team, and not accepting that what we were given, just always wanting more and wanting to improve. And I think back to that, and then being a coach during my university years, getting a degree in sports science and becoming a PE teacher. And then over here in Dubai, being head of sports, I was a PE teacher for 18 years, always helping people, always wanting people to be better at what it is they're doing. And that even resonates today with my son, Harry, when he's writing his name. The letter H is good, but I think we can make this a little bit better. So that element of wanting more from people and helping people, when I look at my Clifton Strengths assessment, which we do in our training, restorative is my number one strength. Now, what that means is it means refining. It means wanting more. It means wanting things better. The basement of that means, it's self-critical, and always very harsh and always kind of eager to want more. So it's, but it's an awareness of myself that I had kind of that skill set and that characteristics and that behaviors from very, very early age.
And then, we spoke before. You've been on this podcast before, and you, I think, had mentioned that growing up, you have had your own sort of level of struggle, whether that was in school, whether that was, sort of as a young, sort of a young adult and things like that. Did you feel that kind of, I guess, motivated you to do the work that you do?
Absolutely. You try and fill the gap of somebody who maybe wasn't in your life. And that's no disrespect to my teachers, to my older friends, to my older sister, and certainly to my parents. I was blessed to have great parents, but, in a very Irish setting, wouldn't have had the skill set to deal with emotional intelligence and the education as well. Doesn't make them bad people. They just didn't know. And I'm very passionate now for our generation, right? We're more educated, we're more aware. We can break that chain and be better, in that particular area. But I struggled. People seen a very different Ciarán. They seen the Ciarán who was, the captain of the sports teams on the track and field team, on the newspaper from winning sports events. A so-called popular young boy, but inside very different.
Really?
Hating his body, hating his legs, hating them legs that won all them gold medals, but not understanding at the time that it was these skinny legs that you hate are actually serving you in a different way. But hating it, the hormonal spots down around my chin, just a very unhappy teenager. And I know it's hard for, my friends and my family to hear that, but it's no fault of theirs. It was just me and my the way I felt at the time.
Do you think that stems from somewhere?
I think it stems from a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, because I think I'm always curious about where these feelings come from. How did it, it's almost you get to a point where you think, what is the origin?
Yeah.
Why did you end up sort of, I know, but I don't know, is this a very common trait within a teenager?
Well, if you look at me, as I said about my restorative part of my skill set, me wanting more is this great strength, but it's also a great weakness. When are you enough? When are you worth it?
Honestly, I feel that people can spend lifetimes swirling around with that particular question because I think you are the sum of your experiences. And if some of your experiences haven't been good, then, it's very, very difficult to be able to pull yourself out of the fact that this was potentially not something that
absolutely
aligns with who you are as a person. So, why do you advocate so passionately to male mental health?
Two reasons, I suppose. One is personal, which I'll get onto in a minute. I suppose, firstly, the pain I hear on a daily basis, the loneliness, the lack of connection from men. I go into organizations and I deliver training on performance. This wonderful positive psychology, we have public speaking, feedback delivery, coaching, all about being better. Who are you at your best? It's all great, it's all motivations, all high level stuff. But I don't think I've ever delivered a training where at least one person hasn't come up to me afterwards and said, can I have your number? I need to contact you privately. And in some cases, in many cases actually, that can be a female wanting me to support their husband. And then when they come on board, it's a case of, flat. lack of purpose. It's so common for men to lose their purpose. The purpose was to have that good job. They got the job. The purpose was to find a lovely lady in their life. They got that. The purpose was to have a child, to have children. And then what? You clock in, you do your job, you clock out, and you come home, you feed the children, you wash the children, you read your bedtime story. If you're lucky, you might get a bit of an hour on Netflix with your wife, and then repeat, And in one way, I can challenge this, because maybe we've got a little bit lazy. Maybe we're not as strong as we used to be as men, and that's, you can really get your fingers in and delve into this conversation. But my dad, for example, worked in the same office for 44 years, probably had a cheese sandwich every day for his lunch, a cup of tea at his break, and then came home to us. He was doing what he had to do to provide for his family. But now that's not enough. We want more. We want, what type of coffee do we have in the office? What type of computer am I using? What's my flexible hours like? And one way we're greedy. Now, to counter-argue that, we're also more ambitious. So it's the fine line between, have we got soft, or do we just want more? Are we not accepting what we accepted in the past? So these are a lot of conversations I have with my clients about their purpose. Loneliness is a massive one. In 1990, there was a survey done for 500 men in the US. 5% of males said that they had no close friends. 5%.
In 1990?
1990. In 2024, that increased to 15%.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people out there that have got friends, they've got colleagues, they've got acquaintances, but actually no friends. And I don't know if you find in your life with your young family, Raya, that the circles you had, you kind of lose them because your family takes over.
Absolutely.
Family takes over. So that connection of going out and, our parents' generation, where I come from, of going to the pub, that doesn't seem to happen anymore. Everything's organized. Even a birthday party everything has been in the calendar, So there's an element of lack of connection with people that comes up a lot. But from my own, pain, having to go through 3 miscarriages was very, very tough. And I'm very passionate about talking about this because I went through lots of pain. Of course, my wife did too, but I kept it in. I found that
it was almost expected.
I did what was expected of me. And to just give you a bit of a, vision of it, I got the phone call at about 3:00 in the day that there was blood. And I knew what was going on. And this was 12 weeks in. And I put the phone down and I just broke down, and I was driving I said, look, I'm going to be there. I'll pick you up. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And I was just in bits during the whole drive, tears coming down my eyes. And as soon as I was parking, I tapped my hand down and said, come on, wipe these tears away. This is not what my wife needs me to be. And I opened the door and I told her, do you know what? It's going to be okay. Because we were brought up in an Irish scene where if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. But I don't agree with that. And sometimes we have to be a bit more present. And I was too much the Irishness of this just isn't meant to be. And instead of showing my emotion, and instead of being fully present and being there with my wife, I kind of blocked it out.
Almost just swept it.
Absolutely.
Swept it under the rug.
Absolutely.
And didn't acknowledge it.
Didn't acknowledge it. And now I've pain for that now, even now when I talk about this, it's like a needle has been stuck into my chest and the hospital was in Shakeside Road. And every time I drive by this hospital, I get this pain.
Trigger.
That there's a part of me that was just thrown into a bin. And it hurts. And I don't know when I will leave Dubai, but when I do, or if I do, it's going to be tough because there's a part of me that's always here. And I think about this a lot. I control it. I manage it. I'm blessed to have 2 children. If I didn't have 2 children, I would be a mess. I would be a mess. But the pain that I go through with this and the pain that I went through with this, it's the fire within me that wants to help others and men to get this conversation out there and not to feel alone.
I just find that that's it. There's so many parallels. I think everyone who's listening, whether male or female, would sort of resonate with that, because naturally you think a traumatic event like a miscarriage, it's not about you. It's not about the man's perspective. And rightly so, the woman is going through a very, very hard time. But it's not to say that her partner and the person who is there wanting to start a family with her isn't feeling the same feelings.
Absolutely.
A loss is a loss, ultimately. And it's one of those things that we have to talk about it from everyone's perspective and have everybody being included and everyone's feelings validated and heard. And it's this type of thing I feel is always going to be an issue when it comes to men.
And this is the thing, there's theories out there that men are, kind of being punished for decades of dominance over females. And that punishment is, well, man up and get on with it.
This is it.
Roll your sleeves up. And
this constant, you're a man.
Yeah.
And therefore it's, heart of stone and cannot show any emotion.
The boys don't cry attitude has to change. And we have to show young men that this is okay to show our emotions. And, like we talk about all the men in business and politics and, the dominance. But you know what? Let's look at the figures here. How many men compared to women are in prison? How many men compared to women are drug addicts? How many men compared to women, are suicidal? A lot more. So there's lots of pain out there for men. Let me give you a few figures. Where I come from in Ireland, in Cavan, we had the highest suicide rate in the whole country. In Ireland, 80% of suicides are men. In the US, it's 4 times higher compared to women. And in the UK, 3/4 of suicides are men compared to women. So yes, men are still striving in the business and political world, but there's a lot of men who are not.
I did read that it was the single biggest killer in the UK for men under 45, suicide. And honestly, that shocked me a little bit, just because, and that's progressively increasing as the years go by. And that in itself is a perfect indication that something must change.
Something must change. And it's very easy to say, oh, we got to talk, we got to listen, but we need to do more. And, regrettably, we had a suicide in the Irish community this year in Dubai, and it's heartbreaking. And that same young man was only out watching golf with his friends a few days before. Nobody knew anything about it. Nobody. And to think that people are going through this pain alone is heartbreaking. I mean, companies take me in to do men's safe circles. Now, who would have thought when we were at school that there was a job for this, that I'm going to be brought into an organization, sit down on a round table with a group of men and say, what's going on? Now it's great that the companies are doing that. It's wonderful. But isn't it crazy that there's a need for that?
Yeah.
And that it has to be structured. So there's something missing in our society where something like that has to be organized.
So what do you think, in your opinion, is the most pressing mental health challenges at the moment that men are facing?
Loneliness is a massive one. That element of connection, which we've touched on. But another area I'll go into is body image. The pressure. We associate body image with females. But in the next decade, to say that, body image and body dysmorphia men is going to take over women.
I heard it's definitely it's on the rise.
Yeah. Look at the Gillette advertisement. The perfect guy with the chin and the perfect body.
The chiseled jaw.
Absolutely.
The perfect body.
The pressure is put on men, and the pressure men put on themselves of being enough. And I think credit to women, and my wife in particular. There's an element of, I think women have more confidence, believe it or not, but women have more confidence in themselves in a marriage. From my own personal experience, I'm always trying to be that best husband, be competent and be enough and be successful, thinking that I have to always be on top of my game. Now, part of that, I'm a believer of this. I get clients who would say to me, oh, my marriage is flat. And I'm like, well, tell me about it. And when you hear it, you hear that they're doing nothing about it. The things they did 10 years ago, they're not doing anymore. But I would actually say that if you made such an effort when you first met, you got to make a bigger effort now. However, there's a fine line between making that bigger effort and not feeling enough, comparing yourself. And that comes up a lot in the conversations I have with men, is that the people that follow on social media, is not good for them. If it's good for you, follow. If it's not good, delete, unfollow. Because as soon as you see somebody and you feel inferior, that's not good for you. And I feel that all the time. I listen to podcasts about the areas of work I do, and I think to myself, oh, I wish I could speak like that. This guy, his knowledge is just phenomenal. You never feel enough. And at some stage, you have to say to yourself, I am enough, and all I can do is my best.
Absolutely. Do this comparison, men and women, comparison, I find, is one of the most detrimental things that you could do for your mental health. And I think we are bombarded with comparisons because it's literally in the palm of our hands. And you're right to say, for example, to look at somebody and again, as almost a 40-year-old woman, you get carried away and you think to yourself, it's time to put the phone down because I'm really starting not to feel good about myself. Yeah. So I think we'll get onto it because obviously we live in this digital space and we've got the influence of social media. And as much as even, as parents, when we try to limit the use for our children, especially when they, sort of go up in the teenage years, when they're so impressionable and still children, to be honest, that is what honestly petrifies me, because what you're doing is you've got a daily reminder of how much you're not enough and how that person is better. But also at the same time, you have absolutely no idea what goes on in that person's life.
And if I can just jump in and give you an example, I work with elite athletes and some fitness models. You'd be shocked with their level of happiness in life.
Sorry to cut you off, but I was speaking to an elite athlete.
Yeah.
It was the most darkest time of that person's life during, that period.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Everything is towards performance. Their diet, their sleep, their social life, their water intake, everything. And let's just focus on a fitness model, for example, male and female. You see this wonderful physique on Instagram and a wonderful 60-second video. You don't see what goes on in the background. You don't see the commitment. You don't see the pain. You don't see what they're missing out on, what they're saying no to. They're saying no to parties. They're saying no to events. They're saying no to going out for dinner with their friends. They're saying no to pizza.
They're saying no to their family.
They're no to everything, and fitness models, as soon as they get into a relationship, either something has to go, the partner or the dream of this lifestyle, because it's not compatible. It's not doable. It's not realistic. And people, there's a shelf life when it comes to stuff like that. But my point here is that what we see, behind the scenes is something very, very different. It's dark.
I totally agree. And I think there's also another notion that I keep hearing, and I find it very confusing because you can see all sides of the coin. It's the idea that we are in this day and age where it's become quite confusing to be a man or a boy. You've got one end or one camp who are constantly saying, you're privileged. It's a man's world. It's a patriarchal society. Why are you complaining? Get up and get moving. You've got on the other side a hyper toxic masculinity. You've got somebody who is, showing all the traits of a narcissist, and this gray zone in the middle. And you're thinking, well, no, I have feelings. I'd like to validate them. I don't want to just get up and keep moving just because the world has historically been male dominated. But also at the same time, I'm not this, sort of hyper masculine individual. And I just find this is where I'm finding it quite difficult because I've got boys. And I do want them to grow up to feel comfortable in their own skin with their feelings and sort of emotions validated, but also at the same time, quite happy with who they are. So this idea of what it is to be a man, there's this dichotomy that I just can't seem to wrap my head around.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, who does a woman want us to be?
Also, that's another question.
Look at your husband.
Yeah.
You flip it here and throw it at you.
I was going to say,
But you married him when you were 16, not because you were too young, but because he was right for you.
mean, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You've been political here?
Maybe, if he's maybe listening to this episode.
So where I'm going with this is...
I think I didn't know who I was at 16.
Yeah, of course. But what I mean by this is, does a young lady want that secure guy who's emotionally aware of his behaviors, emotionally aware of, what his wife or his partner may need? Or is that a little bit boring for a 19-year-old girl who wants a little bit more of a naughty boy, fun boy, or kind of alpha male kind of guy? Absolutely. So if you think of the confusion of a young boy, who does society want me to be? Do I have to be this masculine alpha male guy? Or do I have to be what people on Ray's podcast are saying, or what Instagram is saying, or what society is saying? But actually, is that really what they want me to be? And it's very hard to be a young boy because you're fully, confused of who you need to be, who you want to be, but also what works. Because at the end of the day, young boys, they want to have that girlfriend. Of course, I'm generalizing here, but let's just pick a random young boy who wants that girlfriend. He's going to be who she needs him to be. And if that is an element of bad, but he's going to replicate them behaviors. And a really important thing here, I know we're probably going to touch on it later, is bringing these conversations up at home. Yeah. And a really simple version of this, when we want to encourage our young boys and girls, of course, but for the sake of this topic, we focus on boys, is to demonstrate these and model this behavior yourself. So I would randomly say to my son and my daughter, I'm sad today, and just say why. Or our work was difficult today, and say why. Or use a character on television, if it was naughty behavior. Oh, that wasn't very kind. I don't like how he made that person feel. And what we're doing here is we're creating conversations on emotions. Slightly digressing here, but my point is that, it's hard for young people to know and understand who they need to be.
Absolutely. And that's always been the case. And I find more so when, again, you're talking about your Irish background, my Arab background. Culturally, men, sort of boys don't cry is a very big thing. If, my dad is a very manly man. But
there we go. What does that mean?
Well, exactly. It's changing.
Yeah.
And, he is definitely somebody who I don't think loves to talk about how he feels. Yeah. And that's the way that he's been raised. Yeah. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I love my dad and I hope he's not watching this episode, but I also find that there are lots of characteristics that I would like that to change for my children, because ideally you would want, I just find it's a level of security. Yeah. The security will automatically bring the confidence. If they are secure, which again, I don't expect them to be at a point of teenage or, it takes a bit of time, but it's almost, how do we build the foundations for that? Yeah. That level of be comfortable to talk about how you feel. I think it's every parent's nightmare to be part of the incredibly heartbreaking statistics when you are, dealing with somebody who wants to take their own life. Nobody wants to go there. It's almost an inconceivable thought. So how do we avoid bottling up these feelings with expectations of men and boys? That, for me, I think is the ultimate question that every single parent, every single wife is, probably thinking and has in the back of their mind.
Yeah, well, the best thing we can do there is model behavior, and that's as simple as normal lifestyle choices. I purposely, and for my daughter's case, I want to bring my wife along, but when we do exercise in the park, I get the children to take part with us. And even if they're just messing around, that's fine. But they see that this is what mom and dad does. We're planting that seed. And if you think of growing up in the 80s, I don't know your background, but I grew up in a very smoky environment. Yeah. Smoke was very popular.
Same.
And it was just, I just despise it.
Yeah,
I despise
me too.
it.
It's kind of an aversion.
And if you think of the vision that our young people are seeing now of mom and dad's exercising, wow. Mom and dad are drinking shakes, wow. Mom's making these wonderful little healthy cakes, wow. So modeling positive lifestyle choices is so key. When it comes to emotions, like I said, showing,
Particularly as the dad, for example.
particularly as the dad, showing that I'm sad, and it's a great conversation in the car, when the children don't want to talk after school, is talk about, make it up, like be smart, tell a story about, I watched a movie last night and the guy was really upset because somebody wasn't kind to him. Now, that just is to create conversation. And the perfect result would be, yeah, Daddy, Raya wasn't kind to me at school today. And then you find out more and more and more, and you're creating this platform for your kids to be able to talk to you. It's a safe environment. It's a safe place. When it comes to young men in particular, we have to be very conscious of getting the balance. We have to be patient. Number one, unconditional love. I'm here for you.
No matter what.
No matter what. Number one. Number two, don't push. Probe. Yes, probe, but don't push.
Setting healthy boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah.
Probe, don't push.
Probe, don't push. It's so powerful.
I think it can honestly start from 2 years old at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The thing is, this kind of stuff, it's never too early to start. Never too early to start. The earlier, the better, actually. Like, as I say, I do my 4-year-old boy. We talk about cartoon characters, and the little thing I love to do is to engage him into cartoon characters. I find some of the modern TV pretty boring.
Yeah.
And so I get on YouTube and we watch the stuff I liked. So Rupert the Bear and the animals of Fardingwood and the raccoons. Yeah. But it just creates a conversation about characters and about behavior and about consequences. She's upset because of what he said to her. The Disney movies are so creative, but they can create so much conversation. So use them as a resource. But there's so much that can be done. Always provide a platform where we can go and talk to somebody. If you don't want to talk to mommy or daddy, we can talk to somebody. There's always somebody that can help. This was the whole drive from my book. Yeah. The foundation of my book was, if we get some young girl coming on or boy talking about body image or presentation skills or academic difficulties or difficult relationships with their teachers, their friends or their parents, then somebody may resonate with that and think, I feel like that too. We got to get people to get it out there. With the podcast, same. Adults talking. My second book is about adults talking about their challenges. The more people we encourage to get your story out there, the more your story is going to help somebody else. Because that story, that pain point, that blood, that pain, them tears, come with a solution as well. So what are you doing to get over your challenge? Tell us, share it with us. Let's share these wonderful strategies that we're using to help other people.
Shared experiences. You honestly, you also will bridge the gap of the loneliness factor, because it's not just you who's going through something. I find that is probably the most important thing, because that's why support groups form. Yeah. Because you do have people who have very similar experiences to you, whether good or bad, and just getting them out there and knowing that you're supported is enough to potentially make a change. So it's very important.
It is. Community is so
the village.
The village.
And that's but that is, I find, is the demise of communities these days. It's sort of because obviously we are all sort of living in urban environments, and our communities have gotten smaller and smaller, and shrunk down. So you did mention, speak to somebody. One of my questions was mentorship. To be able to have a trusted member of the community, because I think, if I'm not wrong, children and teenagers eventually there is a period where they almost rebel a little bit away from their parents. But to have sort of an outside mentor, a trusted individual, that can sort of bounce off ideas and potentially lead them into, a path if they are sort of, making sort of bad decisions. I find it's quite important, but that also comes with the community. It is. And of course that takes an element of the parents letting go. That's true. Which is very, very challenging. Yeah. I think I'll definitely have a problem with that. Yeah. I do find, again, a little bit of my background and experience. I was a child of war. I mean, we sort of, my family had moved and immigrated from Iraq at the time of the Gulf War to Australia and then eventually here. So for us, we're very much us four and that's it. Obviously, growing up in the UAE for the past 30 years, my community has grown.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy about that, but it's still fairly small. But I'm very mindful that, again, with the boys that I've got, you know, for example, you know, my brother-in-law is a wonderful person that I'll probably rope in at that time if I need to sort of have a cool, or my you know, sort of my sister's husband as well. So all these lovely connections happened organically, but I find are very important to maintain.
They are. And just to throw in there, how many young boys are being raised by women in today's society?
That's true. Yeah.
What are their, who is their role model in their life? It's their mum, of course. So we have to be very conscious of who these role models are. You know, like Andrew Tate comes up a lot when I work with young boys. They think he's cool, you know, and it's understandable that they think he's cool, but he's not cool. He's naughty, you know, and that behavior of male dominance.
It's the toxic masculinity.
It's male dominance. It is absolutely toxic, and it's dangerous. And if that's the image we're showing male boys, that, you know, if that's your role model, we've got a problem. So you need to be very careful and selective of who we place our young people. But yes, a family member is always wonderful. Very interesting to a task I do is to find out who your child's, you know, role models are, who they're inspired by, because the reality is that's the way they're going to be behaving, you know. And look at movies, look at James Bond. Now, James Bond, we all know James Bond is cool.
Oh, he's so cool.
Is he?
I mean, he's portrayed as this guy in glamorous parties with a tuxedo and takes out the bad guys.
Yeah, but he's a womanizer, right?
Absolutely.
So he's cool.
Never settled down, never been the person with a 9 to 5 and been there for his family all the time.
That's it. You know, so, and look at, I'm playing devil's advocate there. Of course, we all look at him as cool, but is he treating women well? Do you know what I mean? So we got to be careful of what we say. And as I say, movies is a great place to create conversation about certain behaviors.
I totally agree. I feel, you know, this is one of those things. It's unfortunately all the outside influence have sort of trickled down in this glitz and glamorized way, when fundamentally the fundamental behavior that's going on is not right. And nobody wants to go through what James Bond is potentially doing. Or I don't even want to get started on Andrew Tate. But yes, it's just, it's not ideal. And it's one of those things that I find will always skew a perception. But I did want to ask you, so obviously, again, let's bring it back down to teenagers.
Yeah.
If you've got a teenager potentially struggling, and more specifically, a boy struggling in whatever is going on, showing potential signs of mental health difficulty, the majority of the people listening to this would probably ask, well, what are those signs? How would I know if my teenage boy or my young boy or a boy who's in primary still is having a hard time with his mental health?
Great question. And it's a tough question because, you know, look at suicides. Do we know why anyone did it unless they wrote a note? Probably not. But change of behavior is a massive one. You know, listen to what you're hearing, the words they're using, the language they're using. Has anything changed? Did he used to love going to football club and just doesn't go anymore? Is he isolating himself? And the same for ladies, young girls, isolating themselves in the bedroom, they're hiding themselves away. Is there a difference in physical appearance? Have they put on weight? Have they lost weight? Perfect example, I had a client yesterday, an old client yesterday, and I just noticed on social media, he put something up. I contacted his mom straight away. I said, you know, what's happening? What's happening? She said, oh, he's having a bad time. I said, look, I've got 30 minutes from 1 o'clock to 1:30. Get him on a call with me. And he came on a Zoom and he was looking rough. His hair was long, lots of facial growth. He looked tired. And the simple question I asked him was, what's going on? 30 minutes later, boom, he's leaving the conversation feeling great. His mum rings me last night. Oh, whatever you did, he's now shaved. He's gone to the barber. He's exercised. My point is that ignition of fire. We need to look out for these physical signs. The sign I seen was he put something up on social media and it wasn't his true nature.
Yeah.
Now his mum seen them signs and could have maybe maybe she was taking action by saying, excuse me, what's going on here? And this is the conversation, the physical signs and symptoms. So change in behavior, physical changes of the body. Isolation is one thing, is not going out to friends anymore. What's going on? You used to hang out with Johnny the whole time. You're not seeing Johnny anymore, and that this feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. I get it a lot. Oh, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. I can't. So if you hear the language changing, it's such a powerful avenue, indicator, and an opportunity for you to intervene. And of course, the big thing is, I'm here for you to help. And if I can't help, I'll find someone who will.
That's my other question. How do you intervene? Because there are points where you might want, I don't know, it's one of those things that, is it a matter of just literally opening up the doors of their bedroom and sitting there and telling them, tell me what is going on? Or is it just being there silently?
Yeah, and it's a tough one to gauge because the patience, the boundaries, the space, it's all wonderful until something happens. A friend of mine, his nephew tried to commit suicide 4 months ago.
Oh.
And he's heartbroken and his sister's heartbroken. And they did everything. And it came to the stage where they did everything, but they didn't have the solution. And they were seeing a doctor as well. Now, things are good now with medication. And that's the thing. There is a solution, but we need to be willing to take that solution. Medication, of course, isn't the answer to everything, but at that extreme, we need to do whatever it takes. And in some cases, this really opening that door, getting in and being dominant and saying, look, I'm not seeing my child deteriorate like this. We're doing something about this. Yeah. And you have to take control sometimes. Of course, that's extreme situation. You start off with the patience, with the space, with the boundaries, with the I'm always here for you. But at some stage, you may have to roll up the sleeves and get stuck in.
And intervene.
Yeah.
I read this thing that stuck with me for a really long time. I was reading that when your children are fairly young, you are almost at a point in your life where you can, take the new job and maybe work a little bit extra. Your children are young and yes, they do need you. But you have a little bit of leeway where you can also work on what you've got going on in your life.
Yeah.
So almost get to a point where you're in the second phase, which is teenage, where you need to really take a step back and truly be there. Be there, be present physically, mentally, not be there sitting across the table and answering an email. And I find that this is something that me and my husband talk about all the time, because look, at the end of the day, we're all people trying to do our best, whether that is from a family perspective or from a professional perspective. And I find, again, the lack of community and the very competitive landscape which we live in, we always need to be on our A game as professionals, as whatever it might be. But I was telling my husband that at some point when Laith is 11, 12, 13, we need to take a step back. He becomes the priority. We're doing what we can now. And of course, they go to bed at 7. So we can do a lot of our stuff when they're in bed and things like that. But you're going to get to a point where your teen, and I say that with every caution, needs more supervision. You need to be there. You need to be there fully engaged, because you could have potentially missed something quite crucial in a conversation because you are there, but we're slightly sort of distracted. And I know that sounds quite harsh, but I find it might be a realistic option to try to avoid a potential catastrophe down the line.
Yeah.
I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel that this is probably the only way that I know how to potentially protect my children is to just always be around.
Yeah. So you've said two things there: catastrophe and being always there to protect.
Yeah.
It's not achievable, right? It's not achievable. We live in a world where we have to trust. We have to trust our children. We have to trust the environment we're in, the community we're in.
Yeah.
We have to trust society, and we have to allow our children to get out there and learn. Because when you were 14, 15, 16, 17, you didn't want your mum or your dad
No,
dominating you, hovering over you.
definitely not.
So it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And you talk about being there for them more. Yes and no. What I mean by yes is, of course, you need to be there for them, but you can't always be there for them.
Yeah.
You can be tactically and calculatedly there for them, where you are, but you're pretending you're not. That makes sense.
Oh, got you. Yeah.
But you can't. It's the last thing a young boy, I'm sure a young girl wants, is that, oh, mom and dad, just get away. You don't want that relationship. Stop that. Go away. I don't want to be that father. And I already sometimes hear it now with my daughter. It's like, okay, Dad, I'm at school now. Go. Waving.
My son did that the other day. Yeah. I was like, oh, dagger to the heart.
I know. And but we have to grow with our children. We need to be on the same wavelength as them. And it's similarly to the man knowing who to be for his wife. With your children, you need to know who they need us to be, not who we need us to be, but actually it's for them. A lot of parents who are dominant with their children, there's an insecurity there, there's a lack of trust there.
That's true. It's true. I think I don't know. I feel I cannot put myself in a position where to look down another 10 years, but also at the same time, there's just this. It's what's around you that absolutely scares the living daylight out of you, and the stories that you hear, and I think it's at this point, this researching this topic honestly has really, I find, affected me. I think again because I've got two boys, and it's this relationship that I want to give them their independence and space, but I want to be the person that they want to come and talk to when there's something going on. I don't want them to talk to or get information from other people. I want them to be able to get to a point of comfort where they can tell me anything. I might be shocked on the inside, but have to keep a poker face when they're talking to me. That is the goal I'm striving for.
Can I challenge you?
Yes, please.
So in the last 30 seconds, 60 seconds, everything was about you.
It wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't about your boys at all. I want. And this is what we need to be aware of. And if our children feel that mom and dad are doing this because it's what they want, well, I'm not doing it then. The self-determination theory from DC and Ryan is wonderful. We need to move from a directive approach to a non-directive approach from a parenting perspective. The same when I do the same things in organizations with teams. When it comes to leadership, moving away from traditional leadership, you will get more out of your teams by giving them autonomy, by giving them control, by them being more internally motivated. The same can be said for children.
How do we go about doing that?
Trust, education, leading by example. And that's really what three key ingredients here. But if it's I want, there's a problem there. And then we can change that language to I would like. Yeah. And then the next question would be, what can I do to get this outcome, to support this outcome? And unfortunately, one of them key ingredients is trust and space and not being too involved.
It's such a conflicting feeling, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think you're thinking about your boys. Excuse me. I have a 6-year-old girl and I'm terrified.
Imagine.
What life will be like when she's a teenager, what the expectations of being a girl is when she's a teenager. Terrified.
We just got to trust the process, and be there. I don't know.
Yeah, well, educating our children is key, and having conversations, and it's something we didn't have, certainly in my family in Ireland. You know, the whole sex conversation, if I can go there, never had it. Now,
This was another thing I was going to bring up, you know, to be able to form healthy relationships, whether you're male or female.
yeah.
But I find, obviously, you know, again, we spoke about it just a few moments ago about toxic masculinity and that being glorified by lots of different people on social media. It's almost led us into a path where relationships are having detrimental effects down the line.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts is that education comes in, and that's where I was going with my dad. He never had that conversation with me. I had to learn from society. Now, you're on about control. Well, one thing we can control is that we can give the correct message to our children. We can talk about what relationships are supposed to be like. You know, if you want me to go there, you know, with pornography and the image that gives off for young men. And twofold, there's two angles here I'm going to take with that. One is that the way a man's supposed to behave? Maybe I'm not enough. Is that the way a man's body is supposed to look like? Maybe I'm not enough. And of course, as adults, we know that it's not real. It's scripted. It's organized. Is that the way a woman's supposed to feel when I do this to her? Maybe I'm not enough. So the whole idea of young boys watching pornography and not feeling enough is a problem. The other angle here is this the expectation we have on our girlfriends and our husbands and our wives? Is this the expectation that that she should be making these noises? Is this the expectation that this is what a relationship looks like? And it's a minefield of problems because it's giving off the wrong image.
This was also something that is a concern, because at this point, to have conversations around sex and relationships, number one, there's a lot of confusion as to when to start that conversation. Number two, the very powerful presence of very toxic and detrimental has become something almost hand in hand when it comes to young men.
Yeah, it's too accessible.
It's so accessible. And the fact that it's taken a life of its own. And because we have gone inner, sort of digitally, this has become almost, you know, you hear and again see statistics that it's become the only way that people operate. It's become an addiction.
Yeah.
And I think that also leads to this loneliness epidemic, because nobody is going to behave that way, that what you see on, that's never going to be a realistic relationship.
Yeah.
And therefore you've got exposure to it at such a young age, and that's sort of imprinted, and therefore your relationships are suffering.
The expectations, the boundaries, it contradicts what romance is.
Yeah. How do you go about, I don't know, securing that doesn't happen?
It's, you know, what is, do we have a golden wand? We don't, you know, and reality is it boils down to, really is education. And yes, you know, you ask a great question. When do we start? You know, and in a lot of cases, certainly for emotions, the earlier the better. The earlier the better. With this particular topic, that's a hard one to answer. And I suppose you have to observe your children's behaviors.
So what's going on?
What's going on with their friends? Where are they going to? And, you know, using a bit of your intuition and using a bit of your own knowledge and understanding and asking some questions to them, you know, without maybe intervening too much, but asking some questions about their friends. A really good indicator is if your child ever says to you, "Oh, my friend did this." Well, you know, it could be a case where they're looking for a bit of kind of the nod, the head to say, okay, we need to have this conversation. You know, if this is what your friend is doing, then these things have been discussed at school and we need to discuss it right here. Yeah. And, you know, the bottom line is that you can't be there all the time. And I can't be there with my daughter or my son and hold their hand and everything. I have to trust them. And the only way I can trust them is by rearing them and bringing them up in the best environment I can, and being the best dad and being the best husband that I can be. That's all we can do.
Yeah. Oh, it's honestly a bit of a minefield.
It is. It is. And it's tough. It's tough.
It is really tough. And I find in this day and age, kids have it a bit tougher. I find we again have opened up the world of the internet, social media, access to almost everything. And that it's wonderful in some aspects, and it is so detrimental in others. And I think it's maybe just having that conversation early on. You know, this is what you might see. This is what you may come across. You know, happy to talk about it whenever, if you are confused about talking, about something.
Beautifully said.
You know, let's have these conversations, more conversations like these. I mean, parents are probably listening, scratching their head thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to approach conversations with my little boy about sex, for example, or with my little girl for that matter? He went and saw something that potentially scared him. Let's have that. We don't shy away from it. And I think that is what it is, having the confidence within ourselves to put ourselves in an uncomfortable situation with our children.
Absolutely.
So it's a work in progress, I find.
It is. And it boils down to, demonstrating the right behaviors. Like I would show my son how I can show my wife how I love her. That's very important.
Yeah.
If he was to, lots of tit for tat behavior in our house with our children. And there might be a slapping match or a fighting match. And I would always say, do you ever see daddy do that to mommy? And the answer is no. It's exactly. So you don't do that to your sister. And you do not do that to any girl at school. These kind of conversations.
We do that a lot.
Yeah.
We do that a lot. Because, obviously now they are full-blown fighting. And that is a constant way to stop it.
Yeah.
Do you see mommy and daddy talk this way?
Yeah.
Do you see mommy and daddy shout at one another? There's also, on the flip side of the coin, when me and my husband are a little bit irritated, to say and show, I was a bit annoyed with daddy at that point. There's nothing worse. And I remember a story. And again, if my mom is listening, she's probably going to giggle. My mom and my dad used to go into the car to have an argument.
Okay.
We knew they were arguing.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, they very well meaning and didn't want to argue around.
Of course, that was very
considerate.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, I find, what I've done is if obviously it's not a full blown argument in front of the children, but if we kind of bickered in front of them and acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that we are human. This is a relationship.
Yeah.
And we go up and down, and that's just the way it is. But essentially, no matter what happens, we love each other and we're here.
That's it. And of course, I'm not trying to portray that we all should be living this wonderful, perfect world. It's not real.
Colored glasses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Arguments do take place. Yeah. And using an argument as a tool to create conversation.
100%.
Harry, Sophia, I lost my temper there because, yes, I shouted at you, Sophia, because I asked you 4 times to put that away and you didn't put it away.
Yeah.
If you put it away the first time, I wouldn't have had to shout. Yes, I shouldn't have shouted. However, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. It is a point of teaching, I find. It's a hard one. Definitely sort of pull yourself back from your emotions, but you do have an audience. And I always remind myself that there are little eyes and ears that are watching us. And as much as that is quite, I don't want to use the word annoying, but it is definitely something that I have to acknowledge.
Yeah. No hiding place.
No. Unless they go to bed. And at that point, it's, sort of you let loose with whatever you have to say. But it's definitely something I find, whatever wrong, in air quotes, whatever a non-ideal situation, I do try my best to use it to explain the human aspect. That there's absolutely no perfection in this world. Me and daddy are not perfect, and you are not expected to be. And I find that in itself is quite, I'm going to take away from it that I hope I'm doing the right thing. Let's see in a couple of years. The one thing that I've noticed, and I put this out the other day was, again, not so much from a mental health perspective, but it was more from a learning perspective. I think fundamentally we need to accept that boys and girls are different. The way that they learn is different. The way that they interact is different. Rather than trying to group everybody, and not just boys and girls, this one boy and that one boy is completely different together. And I understand that because obviously mainstream schools, you have a larger classroom and you've got bigger population of students. So it's quite hard to deliver individual sort of care for each student. But also at the same time, I find something needs to change. You know, lots of things, you know, again, reading statistics on ADHD, it's more prevalent in boys. You know, things like that. And it's the majority of the time it's diagnosed within a classroom setting. I find that's where I'm having a bit of a hard time, because the majority, again, with a lot of reading that I've done, the majority of these diagnoses have come from potentially not meeting a requirement that the boy needs, as opposed to actually having a clinically diagnosed ADHD.
So I think we need to be very careful with ADHD. And I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And, oh, my son's got ADHD. And I said, okay, tell me about it. Oh, well, it's just, we were told he has it because of his behavior. Well, okay, well, that's not really an assessment.
That's not an assessment. And again, there's some incredible schools and they do whatever that they can with the resources that they've been given. And I know that teachers are honestly godsend. But I find schools in general need to change something. Now, I'm not in education, but I am a parent. And I find in order to create harmony within a class, dispensing out potential diagnoses is not going to help anybody. And again, there is a statistical sort of rise in things like ADHD because of disruptive behavior.
Rise because of disruptive behavior, or rise because more people are being tested and assessed?
That's
because you look back when we were at school, my particular class, half of us might have been diagnosed with ADHD if we were assessed. You know, now when I work with people who have claimed to have ADHD,
I know this is a bit off topic.
It is, yeah. Well, just to throw in there is that, okay, well, that's part of your personality. That's part of who you are. That's one of your strengths. So we need to reframe this language around it, this negative, perception of it, and go, okay, well, this is part of his behavior. So what he might be a little bit hyper, great. How can we amplify that? How can we work with that? I don't mean amplify it by getting him to be more hyper, but actually amplify that skill by using that skill. The education system frustrates me. A complete different conversation, but it assesses everybody along the same criteria. And actually the world doesn't work that way. And we need to look at young people and say, you know what? It doesn't matter if you didn't do well in that exam. You've got a chance. You know what? 'Cause you're a great team player. You're great at working on your own. You're a great leader. You're a great risk taker. Whatever. You're so creative. Let's use this creativity. And this is my passion with teenagers and adults, but particularly teenagers, because we get kind of put in boxes very early. Oh, she's academic. Oh, he's not. He's going to have to work in the buildings. Well, hold on a minute. The skill set here is phenomenal. And a lot of the work I do comes from pain points from looking at my home area where there's so much talent. But because people were put in the box very early, that's the life they're living.
That's very true. I wasn't very good at math. And I was quite good at science. At a very early age, somebody could have helped me get a little bit better. For my whole life, I will, just like now, I have said to you, I'm not very good at math. Yeah. But I'm great at sciences.
Exactly. And now we own our weaknesses and we own our strengths. And we live in a society where we need to amplify our strengths. Yeah. And yes, we can all develop our weaknesses, but you know what? If we're part of a good team, someone's got it.
Absolutely.
Someone else has got this, because this is why we're a team.
That's so true. Honestly, I feel that's a completely separate podcast for another day, because it's this thing that obviously for me, it's the first introduction to the schooling system since I've been in school.
Yes.
Not much has changed.
I think on the outside, we're seeing lots of change, but on the inside, it's still that functional environment.
Yeah.
Same structure.
Yeah.
And when I go into a school and I see children on the corridors doing activities, I love it. It's creative. There's some phenomenal teachers out there.
They really are.
The issue with the teachers is that they're restricted by the system.
This is it. It's not an individual score or individual teacher. It needs to go beyond that. Because, I mean, how do you implement change across the board? It needs to be a higher conversation to potentially kind of look at where the pain points are and try to mitigate those. So it's definitely something that
If you think schools, the curriculum has been taught to deliver in an exam. The curriculum has been taught, the curriculum has been structured all around what KSDA want over here. It's controlled.
It's true. It's
It's controlled environment. Of course, there's other schools out there that follow a different system. You know, I know a friend of mine, he works in a school where it's in a forest, you know. It's very different, you know, and lots of people taking up homeschooling now, taking control themselves. So there are options out there. Of course, everyone doesn't have the resources to make them available.
What advice would you give young men, young boys struggling with self-esteem issues?
I would always start with self-compassion. Be kind to themselves. You know, let's focus on your strengths here. I will always go back to focus on your strengths because we've all got a strength.
We've all got them.
Yeah. Don't be hard on yourself. You know, I was hard on myself growing up and I still am. And I need to be better. But I look at my 14, 15, 16-year-old self and I'm like, I want to hug him. You know, I want to hug him and say, you know what, Ciarán, you know, you are enough. You are enough. So number one for young boys, and of course girls, is to self-kindness is so important. Be realistic in what you want to achieve. When I work with young people and I say, what do you want to be? I want to be rich. I hate hearing that phrase. I hate it, you know, and we gotta educate young people about what's achievable in this world and what's not achievable. And I'm not saying to put a barrier on it and a ceiling, but just be realistic in what we think life is. You know, be smart. For me, the biggest thing, and I probably end all my social media stuff with this, is to ask for help. You know, we don't have to suffer alone. We don't have to do it alone. It's a great strength asking for help. There's so much support out there. Use it.
Yeah. It's just a matter of asking. That's so true. That's, for me, that's the biggest thing. I've always wanted them to be able to ask for help in any capacity, because to bring in somebody else gives a different perspective as well. So it's that, for me, definitely is a top tip in my mind that I try to use almost every day.
Yeah. And the same for adults. Ask for help.
That's true. I ask a lot of help across the board. And it's, I think it's quite difficult for boys and men, to be honest. I find my husband doesn't ask for help very much.
His dad probably didn't. And his grandfather probably didn't. Yeah. So that chain has to be broken. So if your husband wants your sons to ask for help, he needs to model that behavior.
Yep. Looking forward. You, as Ciarán, what would you like to see sort of in the future when it comes to the way that we approach raising boys? Specific changes that you feel will have a big impact.
I think we have to look within. You know, I challenge you about your language. I want. So I think we have to be smart. We have to take a step back. We have to be calculated and smart in our decisions. And we need to know when to step in and when to step away. And trust is the big thing here. You know, creating that trust for our children to make mistakes, for our children to fail, for our children to be successful, but to use all of these experiences and look at it as a learning. Every opportunity is a learning opportunity. So we have to learn ourselves and we have to be better. As parents, we have to be better. We need to model behavior. We need to demonstrate. We need to ask the right questions, and we need to listen. And as you know, listening is something I'm very passionate about. And, we're all great listeners. We've listened from forever. But at what level? We want to get to a level to an active listening or transformational listening where we can really have an impact and we can see the opportunity. We can see the gorilla in the room. We can see what's not being said by listening carefully and being fully present at that with our own self to know how to be for our child. And if how to be for our child is how we think, well, maybe we need to just shake things up a little bit and do things different if we're not getting that outcome with that we hope for our child experience, if that makes sense.
It really does. Everything, all of these things, everything that you've said, not just now, but throughout this whole interview, honestly, it should be and hopefully will be the way forward. Because I am hopeful. I don't think it's all the doom and gloom. I think we are at a point where we are having these conversations. And there is a somewhat of self-awareness that we don't want to go down a path where things are going to be overlooked. So I am positive about the trajectory sort of in the future.
Mm.
And yeah, keep doing what we're doing, keep doing what you're doing. And it is definitely making an impact.
Yeah. Just look at some great people out there,
Yeah.
great kids out there who are doing
absolutely.
wonderful things. And it's absolutely not doom and gloom, but we live in a very competitive world,
Very true.
very fast world. And we need to provide the correct platform for our young people to shine. And remember, as a parent, that's all you want. You want what's best for your child. So don't punish yourself when it doesn't work. And when it does work, learn from that and keep a note of what worked this time. How can you do this the next time? Know your formula.
Yeah, know your formula. But I think it's very important what you said was take yourself out of the equation. It's not I.
It's not about me.
It's not about me.
It's not, and if you can keep reminding yourself, it's not about me, it's not about me, you will be better.
That's absolutely, that for me is my biggest take home from
Correct.
today. Because, you literally, you said it mid-conversation. It's true.
Yeah.
And it is an active thing that I do have to remove myself from that equation. It's about them, not me. I'm fully grown.
Absolutely.
So that's it. That's what we're doing. Removing the eyes from that conversation.
Yeah.
Ciarán, thank you.
Pleasure.
This was so informative. And I've been looking forward to this for months.
Yes.
So I really appreciate your time and effort and energy to be here today. I know you've got a couple of very grueling days ahead of you. So I really appreciate it.
No, it's great to be here. I love your show and keep doing what you're doing. It's helping people out there. I'm passionate about people sharing their challenge and sharing their solution. And the more people like you we have talking, the better. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to They Say It Takes a Village. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I look forward to bringing you another one next week. Don't forget, please subscribe, rate, and review so I can reach and help even more parents. And if you've got a topic that you'd like me to cover, please head over to my Instagram page, ittakesavillage.me, and drop me a line.